So today we're going to take a look at the TEAM model, the Tennessee Educator Acceleration Model. A couple of things or reasons as to why the TEAM model is being implemented by a variety of school districts across the state of Tennessee. One, they're just trying to improve instruction. And I think that's a goal of all evaluation models that are being implemented and being used today, is we want to improve the instruction of the teachers. And then two, by having better instruction, the goal is that you're going to improve the learning of the students as well. So let's take a look at today's presentation. So what are the benefits for educators? Frequent and constructive feedback, a framework to pinpoint teachers' individual strengths and development. It's a way to recognize and learn from Tennessee's most effective educators in order to better support other educators and the system as a whole. Now, most of you have probably heard people talk about the TEAM model and the evaluation systems that are being used today, specifically here in Shelby County. So some of you are familiar with TEAM, some of you are familiar with the TIM system. One of the things that people have noticed right away is maybe you're not receiving as many 4s and 5s as was the custom with previous models. One of the reasons that they were wanting to shift to the TEAM model is so that a 3 would be considered a good teacher, and so that 4s and 5 would be a way for us to be able to effectively recognize high quality teachers. And so it's been a transition not only for educators but also for administrators as well. Has it been successful? I think time will tell, and I think all of us have our own opinion that we can add to the discussion. So we look at the NIET teacher evaluation process. So today our goal is just to look over a variety of things related to the TEAM model. So when we look at NIET, the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching, when it was first introduced, it wasn't expected that individuals would be able to begin immediately utilizing this multidimensional observational tool for feedback and growth at a conceptual level of application. And so when we think about that as a participant, this is knowledge that's important for us to understand as we move forward in the process. Experience will provide a development of evaluating skills. So understanding and expertise will only be increased through exposure, engagement, and practice. Essentially, as evaluators, the only way we improve is through the practice. And so today we're going to focus on how the TEAM evaluation model measures teachers. 50% of the model comes from observation. So today we're going to focus on the qualitative, and that is the teacher evaluations that take place. 35% comes from student growth, and as you know, if you're teaching in Shelby County this year, Shelby County has adopted the student growth measures that are being used for physical education instead of having to rely on school scores. And then 15% is student achievement data. I do have a document that I can share with you that gives physical education teachers their options on what they can choose this 15% to be represented by. And so the elements of an effective lesson placemat. This week in your discussion, you're going to list 5 elements of an effective lesson. So when you think of a lesson you deem to be effective, what were all the elements that led you to that decision? So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to look at all 5 of your responses as it relates to what you believe to be most important, and then we're going to take the similar answers and we're going to come to a consensus. We're going to decide as a group what are the most important elements of an effective lesson. So once we do that, we'll be able to better understand what we consider to be an effective teacher. So let's look at some elements of the TEAM model. And so we're going to focus on what we consider to be effective elements. And so let's look at the list together. Define learning goal that is clearly communicated to students, student engagement and interaction, alignment of activities and materials throughout the lesson, student relevancy, numerous check for mastery, differentiation. Now again, let me make this clear. This is a list that was composed for all teachers. We want to focus primarily on physical education. So even though this list may be similar to the 5 that you create, it may also be very different because this is a very short list of effective elements. We're going to come up with a much greater list, a much larger list for physical education. So you may see a lot of different things compared to this list. So when you look in your documents for this week, you're going to notice that there's a variety of documents that I have attached. And so instead of getting to that right now, I just want to I want us to focus on the PowerPoint presentation and the content that's displayed here. What I want to do right now is I want to make sure you understand the different parts of the rubric. And so we're going to take a look at the domains. You'll notice here instruction is the first domain that's listed here. We also want to be familiar with the indicators. So on the far left, you're going to find the indicators on the rubric. You'll also find the descriptors. And you'll find the performance levels. Now 3 meaning at expectations, 5 being significantly above expectations, and then 1 being significantly below expectations. Primarily, many teachers were being graded out at 4s and 5s. So it was very hard for administrators to be able to distinguish who those quality teachers were. I understand that from a personal level, but also from an evaluator perspective, because there have been schools that I have gone into where teachers were not high quality teachers, yet they were receiving 4 and 5s in the evaluation process. It's something that I think needs a lot more research. I think research needs to be done on the views of an administrator, the views of the teacher, and also the views of a student as it relates to what we deem to be quality instruction. And so one of the things I think would be very beneficial for you is to look through the rubric, look at the descriptors, and I think it's important for us to highlight keywords. So what I want you to do, and this is something you'll do on your own time, this is not something you're going to turn in for a grade, but I want you to highlight keywords from the descriptors under the at expectations. And I want you to do it for the columns for motivating students, presenting instructional content, activities and materials, questioning, academic feedback, and grouping students. Now, when you are doing this, just focus on what the key words are. What are the words that we are focusing on as we're evaluating someone to determine whether or not they're a 3, they're a 4, they're a 5, or even a 2 or a 1. When I was going through the training for understanding the team system, we would have to watch a video of a teacher, we would have to take notes, and we would have to give a score for each of these categories for each teacher that we watched. The interesting thing was everybody in the classroom was giving a score. We would all list what we gave for each of the categories, and then they would give us the actual evaluation score. And it was interesting to see how sometimes we would be right on the mark, but sometimes we'd be really off. The evaluation was very subjective, but the feedback that was given made a lot of sense once we watched the video and had a better understanding of what was happening in that video. So one of the purposes of this class is for us to watch a video, to write notes, okay, very descriptive notes, and then to give a score that we believe would be most appropriate. Once those scores are given, we'll talk about it as a group, and we'll come to a better understanding as to why we came to that final conclusion. And so, looking at standards and objectives, and so we look at the parts of the rubric that correspond to your consensus maps. For example, if you put there needs to be an objective, where in the rubric would that be found? Okay, and so let's go back to that previous slide. What you have to do is, if that's the question you're asking, or that's the statement that you're putting in your evaluation, there needs to be an objective, you would look at this particular rubric and you would decide, okay, how am I going to grade this? Is this a 5? Is this a 1? Is this a 3? But you need to base it on the notes that you write. Anytime you do any evaluation, you always want to have justification for the score that you are turning in for that particular teacher. And so what we're going to do this week is we're going to watch a lesson and we're going to apply some of the learning that we have had so far about the rubric. Now, our learning at this point has been very minimal, but the best way for us to learn how to use a rubric is for us to be able to watch a lesson and evaluate it in our own time. After you watch the lesson, you'll be asked to decide upon an indicator that the teacher was relatively strong in and an indicator that the teacher could improve. And you'll do this in your evaluation rubric. So you have to think, where was this teacher strong? Where was this teacher weak? In order to decide upon these areas, you will need to take notes during the lesson as evidence of your decision. And so I'm going to send you a kind of a cheat sheet for how to take notes when you're evaluating these videos. And so when you're collecting data, or excuse me, when you're collecting information, you want to have unbiased notes of what occurs during the classroom lesson. So in other words, you want to capture what the teacher says, what the teacher does, what the teachers say, or excuse me, what the students say, and what the students do. So essentially, you're going to be writing almost the entire time. When we went through this process, the people who were training us said you need to be writing the majority of time when you're evaluating a teacher, because every bit of evidence that you can have is going to support your decision. You're not going to have a video to go back and watch when you're evaluating a teacher in real time. So the collection of detailed evidence is essential for the evaluation process to be implemented accurately, fairly, and for the intended purpose of the process. Think about it. If you're a teacher and somebody's evaluating you, wouldn't you want to have a lot of notes from that evaluator to have a better understanding as to how they got to that score? And then how would you reinforce and refine this teacher's practice? So reinforcement being an area of relative strength, refinement an area of relative weakness. And so those are some things that you should be able to accomplish whenever you are having a discussion with the teacher. So for example, with a shoulder partner, look at your notes and pick an indicator for their reinforcement and refinement. We don't have the luxury of having a shoulder partner because this is an online class and we're not going to be in the classroom together, but you do have the opportunity to communicate with your classmates. So when I say with the shoulder partner, feel free to email other members of the class and ask them their opinion on different areas of the evaluation. Why did you choose each area? What evidence do you have from the lesson? So these are things that you can discuss before you come to a determination of score. We're going to share our scores with one another later on once this activity has been completed.